Salutations readers, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Nkechi and this is my wrap up for May and June 2025. Y'all, May and June were, honestly, they were pretty good reading months, not gonna lie. The months in themselves were kind of, June was a little bit rough, not gonna lie. But in May, I had a pretty good reading month and so did I in June. Now, quantity wise, there was a little bit of a dip in June. But quality-wise, it was still pretty good. So honestly, I don't really have much to complain about. I'm just glad that I found a lot of new favorites this past couple of months. And I'm actually very curious to learn about y'all, if any of y'all have any new favorites from May and June. So don't forget to leave that in the comments down below. But let's just get right into it. So first up, let's talk about my stats for May. In May, I read 12 books, DNF'd 5, paused 3. So pretty solid, I think, reading month. Not too many DNFs, and a lot of the DNFs were hard DNFs. Number of pages read, 1,683 pages. Hours listened, 65.72 hours, and my average reading was a 4.36, which is really, really good. I think the lowest rated book I read in May was 3.25 stars, so that's a pretty solid reading month, not gonna lie. And I think I have the graphic right somewhere here in the screen. From Storograph as far as all the graphs and the genres and stuff. And it's actually very interesting to see that literary fiction and romance tied for most read genre. That's interesting, to say the least. I don't know. I find it fascinating it's fascinating for me to see me lean away from fantasy as time goes on. And I'm reading more literary fiction or even romance. But I'm still reading some fantasy, don't get me wrong. But then I'm reading other things that are not fantasy, especially non-speculative genres. I find that quite fascinating, not gonna lie, especially in May. But anyways, here is a graphic right here as far as the things that I've paused in DNF. I don't really have time to go through all the pauses and DNFs. The pauses I see myself returning to is just that I kind of was being a little bit more focused in May, so I didn't really get to the books I paused. And as far as my DNFs, I was struggling, honestly, with science fiction. Science fiction was a struggle. Like, I wanted to read science fiction in May, but I just couldn't finish anything that was sci-fi. Not gonna lie. But I do want to get back to, I think, Ocean's Godori. I'm just gonna try, I think I was reading it for the most part via audio or ebook. I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure out, maybe just going to the ebook next time I try this again. But I was just not quite in the mood for it. But everything else, though, is like, Like Gifted and Talented, which sucks because I had an ALC from the publisher. And then I also got Where the Axe is Buried ALC from Macmillan Audio as well. That sucked. Dawn Hounds was actually part of my self-destruct TBR, so that's also getting on hold. And same thing with Space Between Worlds, so that kind of sucked a little bit. But nonetheless, we gotta keep on moving. And in May, I participated in 2 readathons. I participated in the Asian readathon, which for the most part was pretty much a success. I didn't follow through with my TBR. Let's be honest, every single time I post a TBR video, it's very rare for me to actually follow through on that TBR, so if you know me, I did not get through all those books, okay? I think I read only like a few books, and I still completed the readathon, so, you know. I did the thing. And then I participated in the Goober Readathon, which if any of y'all have seen my May reading journal setup video, I briefly talked about the Goober Readathon. That one I wasn't the most successful with as much, but it was still fun to attempt. It was just a little bit hard and it was a little bit difficult to get through the prompts, but I still had fun though. All right, now it's time to get into the books that I read in May. Now, since it's been, I am recording this wrap up in like early July, so I'm like, my brain is like, what did I read in May? Child, so I don't really have a lot of like actual solid reviews on these books, but you know, I'm gonna try to give y'all my thoughts on these books, okay? So first up, I did read Somadina by Akwaeke and Emezi. This is their 9th book. It came out in April. I pre-ordered this book, and I really did enjoy this. This is young adult fantasy where we're following Somadina and Adjei-Brenyah. They realize they have some sort of magical powers. Adjei-Brenyah goes missing, and Somadina tries to find her missing twin. This was a really enjoyable story. I did Hibbert read this story as well. I do recommend the audiobook if you are into reading audiobooks, but also physically or with just your eyeballs, whether it's physically or digitally. Also do recommend reading this as well. I don't think it's as good though as like Pet and Bitter by this author, but I still really enjoyed this. I do like how there was a little bit of inspiration of the Biafran War, like the aftermath of the Biafran War, which you do not know, which is Nigeria's civil war after Nigeria gained independence from Britain. And like the pain and the hurt and confusion that happened during that aftermath. Yeah, it was just I just really appreciate that touch into the story. So it hit for me personally a little bit more. And I give it 4.5 stars, but I couldn't quite give it a higher rating because there was this like romantic subplot between Somadina and some other character that I wasn't really here for. I don't think that particular romance was really written well, unfortunately, but I still recommend any of y'all to read Somadina if you are interested, and if you have not checked it out already. After that, I read James by Percival Everett. This is like a reimagining slash retelling slash extension of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but this is in the perspective of James, the enslaved man, and this is his story. We learn about him living life as an enslaved man, gaining his freedom, and I don't know, this was just so good. I don't remember which prize this book won, but it definitely deserved that prize, okay? I have not read anything by Percival ever before, but this book made me want to really read more of his backlist, and for sure anything else that comes out after this, for sure. Like, this was so fast. First of all, this is a very fast-paced story. So whether you read this with your eyeballs or you listen to the audiobook, which I do recommend, it is narrated by Dominic Hoffman. And Dominic Hoffman is one of my favorite male narrators. Like, I always trust his narration style and his speed. So if you're into Dominic Hoffman's narration, highly recommend the audiobook if you have not checked it out already. It's very much fast-paced. It's not even that long either. It's actually about 300 pages. And since it's fast-paced, the pages just fly for themselves. And it's a particular sense of wit and dark humor that, like, I really appreciate for such a story that portrays American slavery, but also making sure that he's really much human. He has his joys. There's some moments in here that are like positive. It's not just a dark, bleak story, but it's just feels like a really real story. And I love how this story also humanizes Jim from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, granted, I have not read the book. I never will read that book. Or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. You will not make me. You can't make me. But this one, though, I would love to reread this one. And I did butter read this with my mom, and we both read it really fast. I think my mom read this in a day, and I read it between like 2 days. I think that endorsement says it all. After I read James, then I read Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is my second book by Jane Austen I've read now. This one is, I think, as far as books that she's published, this is actually the one that was published after her death, and this was the last one that was a completed story that was also published. This is a second chance romance story where we follow Anne Elliot, who fell in love with a Frederick Wentworth, but she was persuaded by an older family friend who did not think that economically he's worth her time or anything. So Anne was persuaded into not marrying Frederick Wentworth, even though they were in love. So he went on to sea, he became like this Navy captain, and he rose up economically. And then for Anne's family, the wealth went downwards. So yeah, 8 years later, they meet up again, and yeah, Jane Austen does her thing. I am actually glad that I read this kind of second, not gonna lie, because this was actually the one I wanted to read first by Jane Austen, but I am glad I read this one second, because it did make me realize that since this was the last one that Jane Austen, had one of like her books to be published along with like Northanger Abbey, I didn't realize it was shorter than I thought. I don't think it was meant to be this short. I feel as though if Jane Austen had a little bit more time, in her life, maybe a little bit longer, because I do think the story is just a little bit short. Just a little bit, just to have some more fleshing out some characters and maybe working a little bit on the pacing, which is why this book was not much of a 5-star. This was a 4.25 star, but I really did appreciate how Jane Austen wrote Anne Elliot's character, since she is not much like a Lizzie Bennet, okay? Anne is more soft-spoken, she's quieter, and I will say she's a people pleaser. But as time goes on, you kind of see in how those kind of character things that I saw as flaws actually really worked for her in her benefit and throughout the story. And seeing that how even Captain Wentworth also saw that in Anne, and how he began to fall in love with her again. And I don't know, I just think this second chance romance was just actually pretty cute. So, if you have not read Persuasion, I do recommend this. I don't think it's the greatest, but then again, I've only read 2 of her works, so what can I really say when I haven't read her other ones? But so far, the 2, this is my least favorite, but not by much. So if you are interested in reading Jane Austen, I think Persuasion is a pretty solid enough start. But ideally, when it comes to any classic, just start with the one that seems interesting to you. And I went with Pride and Prejudice, okay? But I am glad that I read Persuasion, and I highly recommend that y'all check this one out if you have not read much of Jane Austen. After that, I read Brewed with Love by Shelly Page, I think is the author's name. This one is a young adult cozy fantasy romance where I think we had like friends, like ex-friends turned lovers or something like that. It takes place in a small town. Main character works in an apothecary shop that's run her family. It gets robbed, and I think the main character's ex-friend, ex-crush even, I think, moves back into the town after like 4 years and starts working in the family shop, and they had to work together to figure out who stole this one potion that the main character was brewing or something like that. I don't quite remember, but I do remember really enjoying this one. I did read this one via audio, and I do actually recommend the audiobook. It's pretty solid. And as far as like romantasy goes, I was genuinely surprised I even would like this because I didn't think I would, since again, fantasy and romance is such a hard genre blend that it really works for me. But this one really did, honestly. I was kind of surprised. I really liked the characters. I liked the character growth. I liked and how they kind of like rekindle a little bit of like their previous friendship, but also how they grew that to love as well. I'm not really one for witches as much, but I did like the portrayal of like the witches in this story as well. I thought this was just a very much cute, fun story. So if you're interested in finding like a witchy, cozy fantasy romance, I recommend this one. Granted, it is young adult, but I do think that the characters are endearing enough that maybe you're not too much into young adult. This is worth checking out. So yeah. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. After that, I read If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. I read this book for my Indianapolis 500 reading challenge vlog, so I will link that in the video description if you have not checked that out already. But this kind of actually did really come in as a surprise because first of all, I didn't even know I was even in the mood for literary fiction because this is literary fiction. It's adult lit fic where it follows two unnamed protagonists. One of them is an Egyptian American woman who's moved to Cairo, Egypt, and the other is an Egyptian man who came from a small town all the way to Cairo, which is a bigger city. And it's pretty much about this toxic relationship between them, how they like met and fell in love and things that fell apart in the end. So yeah, it's also structured differently as well. You don't really quite know who's speaking to who. Like there's 3 parts and each part is structured differently. So I do recommend the audiobook for this one because there are 2 narrators. One of the narrators is the author herself who narrates the female main character's perspective, and there's another narrator that narrates the male main character's perspectives. So that way you can differentiate who's speaking here if you were confused. So highly recommend checking out the audiobook on this one. And I really enjoyed this one. I mean, enjoy is hard to say because like there's some dark shit in here. So definitely look up content warnings. But I really appreciated the author's writing style and the kind of story and also the complexity and the nuance in here regarding the intersectionality of regarding being Egyptian American and coming back to learn about your roots, and then also being Egyptian, but you come from a small town and you're poor as well, and you're going to a bigger city, and how that kind of relationship really, that level of how gender, nationality, class, all that stuff intertwines together into like a toxic relationship. This was just really, really good. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I think the ending was the one that really made me go, a little bit. I couldn't give it a full 5 stars, but if I were to reread it, I think I might change it to a 5 stars eventually, but right now it's sitting at a 4.5. After that, in the same vlog, I also read Force of Noise by Mosab Abu Toha. That is his, I think, most recent poetry collection that came out last year. I think I rated the same thing as like his other poetry collection. I gave it no rating because it's not fiction. I don't really rate poetry, but this one is pretty much similar in the sense of like it does deal with heartbreak and grief and being Palestinian in Palestine, but also being Palestinian outside of Palestine and what that means. This is very much an emotional read. I do recommend any of y'all to check this one out if you have not already. After that, I read The Orc and Her Bride by Lila Gwynn, I think. I don't remember the author's name. And this one, I don't quite remember much on the actual story, so apologies on my lack of, I guess, review for this one. This is the lowest rated book I read in May. I gave it 3.25 stars. At the time, I recognized it being a pretty solid read, but this is an adult fantasy romance that is sapphic, and it deals with elves and orcs. The elven princess was really annoying. I remember her being very annoying. And then the orc princess was super sweet, and I just thought that the elven princess, she did not deserve the orc princess, okay? But then the elven princess grew on me eventually in the end, character development and all that, but I was still mad. how freaking rude she really was in that beginning. Oh my gosh, I was not having it, okay? But nonetheless, though, I still recognize this being a good book, so, 3.25 stars, but I don't remember much about this one. And apparently this is supposed to be a first book in a series? I don't know when the sequels are coming out. I might check out the sequels, but that first book is a little bit not memorable for me, so maybe not. After that, I read Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the third and final book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. This is my favorite one in the series. I think I already have a vlog where I talk about my praise for this series and this book in particular, so I won't go too much in detail here, but I did give that book 4.75 stars, so definitely recommend reading this trilogy if you have not checked it out already. Like, please, I want more. I want even more people to be reading this series if you have not already. And in that same vlog, I did also read Immaculate Conception by Lila and Huang. I got it as an e-arc from Dutton, so thanks to Dutton for the e-arc. I really enjoyed this one. I think I give this one 4.25 stars. It wasn't quite the literary horror I thought it was going to be, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. It was pretty slow though. And a part of the synopsis did spoil, there's a part in the synopsis that doesn't happen until like the last bit of the book, so it was kind of annoying, not gonna lie, getting that, and you're like, wow, when's that really cool part gonna come in? Sometimes you just gotta be careful reading these synopses, y'all, okay? They be tricking you. But when you do get there, and even other parts before we get there, it's like, oh, I see how we slowly got to the point of basically kind of no return. And I thought that the very end of the novel didn't quite land for me. There's a little bit regarding like character decisions. I was like, I don't think that should have happened at the very end. But you know what? We're here. You know what I mean? So I give it 4.25 stars. I still recommend, though, checking it out. And I'm definitely going to be reading the author's debut novel, which was Natural Beauty. I still own it on my shelf, so I will be reading that book. After that, I finally finished reading the Burning Kingdoms trilogy by Tasha Suri with the Lotus Empire. I think I talked a lot about this book, about my thoughts on it. But if you did not know, this is the third book in this trilogy, in the Burning Kingdoms trilogy. And I really did enjoy my time with the Lotus Empire. I gave this one 4 stars. I was a little bit disappointed actually with this book because of its pacing. I thought the book would be a little bit faster. Like since we we had the ball get to be rolling, but it did take a while before we got to like explosive climax. And even that climax I felt was just really, really fast. So honestly, the pacing did drop the rating pretty low down to, instead of maybe closer to a 5 to more of a solid 4. But nonetheless though, this was an enjoyable read. I'm pretty satisfied, honestly, as to where these characters ended up and how he got there. Like, with Priya and Malini, if you've read it, you know. Bhumika, oh my gosh. Rao, oh my gosh. There's just so many things with these characters, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need more people to be reading this series. Like, I need more people to be reading this trilogy, okay? I don't know, what else do I need to say? What else do I need to say to convince y'all to read this series? I don't know. I don't know what is there to say anymore. I truly don't know what y'all want from me. I want more people to read the series. So, take that as a sign that you need to read the series, okay? Okay, yeah, 4 stars, but I still say this is a pretty solid conclusion. After I read that, I read The Favorites by Ling Fargo. This is an adult contemporary sports love story, romance kind of thing. I mean, I'm not sure about romance. I know people were, really finicky on using romance to tag for this book, but love story. Let's just say, for argument's sake, it's a love story, okay? This is supposed to be, I think, like I don't know if it's quite a retelling of Wuthering Heights, but it's definitely inspired by Wuthering Heights for sure. And I really enjoyed this. I was so surprised on how much I would enjoy this. Like, it was dramatic. It was some toxic, messy shit going on between Heath and Catherine and the other sports things. Like, this was very much it's a sports book, okay? Because we're doing with ice dancing and getting to the Olympics and being the Olympics and being Olympian and how that did with their relationship. Like, I was here for it, okay? I was here for the mess of it all. And I'm so glad that I checked out the audiobook because the audiobook came in clutch. All right, multicast. I love the format that's documentary. So the fact with multiple narrators, see, that's when I know I chose the right thing and chose with the audiobook because yes, I love that. So this one I gave 5 stars. Definitely a favorite of the month. James is still, I think, the overall favorite of the month, but the favorites is definitely a close second. I really did enjoy this one. I know it's not going to be quite meant for everyone because of how toxic and messy it all was. Maybe not much into ice dancing or the format, but if you are interested, even just a little bit, actually, you don't even have to be interested in ice dancing because honestly, I'm not really interested in ice dancing even as an Olympic sport or anything like that, but this book, I was here for the competitiveness, I was here for the drama, sports-wise, romantically, I was just here for all that shit, okay? So, you don't need to be into ice dancing to be reading this book. Just saying. And then I ended the month with Minor Detail by Adania Shibley, if I remember correctly. And I don't quite remember who the translator was. I apologize. But this is actually the only book that I read that's actually translated. I've been wanting to read more translated work for a while now, and I'm glad I read this one. This is the story that, if I remember correctly, did not win a certain award in Germany because of the fact that the author is Palestinian. And this is a very much Palestinian story because we follow, actually the story is split into two parts. The first part is following an IOF soldier. I think this was before the Balfour Declaration, or was it a year after the Balfour Declaration? Declaration. I don't quite remember on the year it was set. I can remember if it was 1947, 48, or 49. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But that half is following the IOF soldier and how a group of IOF soldiers raped a Palestinian girl, and then I think it's like decades later that we follow a young Palestinian woman who is obsessed with this minor detail of the fact that this event happened exactly about 30 years or so, just decades before she was born, and she was obsessed with this particular detail. Now, granted, the first half was very, very boring. It was very, very dull. Like, we got the minute, dull details of this IOF soldier's perspective. I was not having it, okay? That first half, I was not having it. But when we get to the second half, though, I will say, I did appreciate how we got all these minute details and how I was like, wait, these details overlap into the second half. Like, it was actually... like I saw the callback, so it is worth, that first half to get to the second half, especially with that ending. But I still will say this was not a 5-star read. This is a solid 4-star for me, because that first half, oh my gosh, was so freaking dull. I'm just so glad it had a payoff, but the payoff was not explosive enough for me to give it 5 stars. Okay, it is also interesting too because there's a certain emotional distance. Like, it's not like, I don't know really how to describe it per se, but like, it's not an emotional read as I thought it was going to be. So I was a little bit surprised there, but it's a different way of framing the story than you would think. As far as the assault, it is not on page, it is not graphic to let anyone know, but I do recommend checking out this story if you can, and I do also recommend the audiobook if you have access to the audiobook. All right, well, that's it for May. Let's get right into June. June, I read less in June. I read about 7 books. Not a huge decrease, but a substantial decrease. Not the worst thing. I did DNF only 2 books, though, so I don't know. I just wasn't really reading as much. And I think I paused, though, a lot of books. Like, I was trying to read things, but I didn't want to officially DNF anything. I don't know. I just wasn't quite in the mood to be reading as much, I guess, in May as I thought I would. So I didn't really try to force myself to finish much. So, honestly, that's pretty much fine. Now, pages read, 829, which is really low as far as my eyeball reading. I guess I was just tired of eyeball reading in May. Then I was like, okay, I need to listen to audiobook because I listened to 66.45 hours, which is a lot. And my average reading is a 4.25 stars, which is really solid, not gonna lie. And here's the graphic from Storygraph with all my stats and stuff. And yeah, I was reading more romance around this time. Like, I actually am kind of surprised on how much romance I managed to read in June. Now, if you do look here a little bit closely on the Storygraph graphic here, it does show that 14% of the reads is print. It's more of a hybrid read. I had a book that I read was physically, and I was tracking it physically, but I did have also the audiobook. So yeah, it was an audiobook heavy month. All right, despite what Storygraph is showing y'all right here. Okay, so apologies, my camera overheated, so I just had to take like an hour-long break from recording. Where was I? Right, so pauses and DNFs. Did not DNF much this past month, but the books I did DNF, let's see, The Chosen the Beautiful, I DNF'd it 3/4 of the way through. I was just really, really tired of The Great Gatsby story. Like, I'm sorry, I was so tired. And then I also DNF'd A Far Better Thing. This one is actually a retelling of A Tale of Two Cities, a classic of which I've never read before. I've never read anything from this particular author before, or Charles Dickens before, so I'm like, I don't care, and it deals with fairies. Like, child, I did not give a damn about what was going on. And that was also unfortunate because I got the audiobook from Macmillan Audio, so that sucks. And for the books I paused, a lot of it honestly is books that I borrowed from my library. There's only one. It's actually an arc, like Harmonton season. So yeah, I do plan to get back to those books I paused though. Okay, my camera is like not sure what it's doing right now. So apologies for the weird focusing issues. And also in June, I did host for the very first time the Stitch Day readathon. It was 26 hours. I did stay up for the entire 26 hours. I did stream because we had reading sprints. I did stream for the entire 26 hours. So thank you all for joining me if you did join me during those sprints at any point in time, whether you were there the entire time or you were just in and out. Although I will have to say apologies for the lack of a replay because of the fact I did stream for those 26 hours straight within one stream. It was not able to save the replay, unfortunately. So there is no way that even I can even access the replay anymore. But in the future, I will split it up into more than one part so that we can actually get a replay, you know? So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to doing it again next year. Well, that's it. Now let's get into the books that I read in June. I did not read a single book that I owned, so we're just gonna have to roll with what we got. I started off the month by reading Changing All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is an adult queer literary dystopia novel that is like Battle Royale competition story, but following American prisoners. And this is talking about the prison system, the prison industrial complex, and also abolition. Like, this was like a really, really good book, y'all. This was actually a book that was recommended to me for like expressed by 6 friends. And I will recommend to y'all to also check this book out. This is a story that like I want more people to read. And also to maybe as a way to like get into learning more about abolition. I'm still learning about abolition, and I think this book is just really doing something that I have not really seen before, especially regarding in like the dystopian space with Battle Royale. Because like, I don't know, when I see books that are like, you know, compared to the Hunger Games, I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever about it. Full disclosure, I never read the Hunger Games. I have no intention of reading the books. Y'all have fun with that. But this book, though, it did something that actually really intrigued me way more than the Hunger Games. And it's actually following like a group of characters that I never thought that we would get to like focus on, you know, like American prisoners, like how they live through the system. How did they also survive if they end up surviving or dead? And like, even though, yes, they committed like crimes and stuff, but also like it's also humane in the way that they're being treated in these prison systems. Like it's also very much inspired by our actual incarceration system. And I really appreciate the amount of research that Adjei-Brenyah went into writing this novel, and I would love to read more from him in the future as well. Whether it's a novel or short story collections. I do know he has a short story collection called Friday Black that I'm now curious to read. But Changing All-Stars is a really, really good read. I did read this one via audio, and I give this one 4.75 stars. It did take me a while to understand like who I'm following, because I thought the main characters would be like Lowrider Thorwar and Hurricane Stax, but we get perspectives from other characters who are a part of like the Battle Royale system, and also people who are leading the system, you know, who's in charge of like with the system itself, and then also people outside of the system, whether they watch this, because it also is televised as well, people who are against this and all of that. It's this is a really important read and a really good read. I don't know about enjoyable because the emotions in this one, but this is a really good book, and I want more people to read it. After that, I read Rose House by Arkady Martine. This is a sci-fi thriller novella, and I was reading it for the Interstellar Book Club, which is hosted by Steph from Coffee Over Apples. I didn't particularly really love this one. I don't even know if I really enjoyed it. It was really of a confusing read. It's like Haunting House with like AI. And I thought the concept was pretty cool, but I was mostly confused, not gonna lie. And it's not really as memorable now in my brain, so I don't really have much actual thoughts on it. I just remember giving it 3.25 stars, or maybe even a 3-star. But yeah, this one was honestly just a miss, kind of, for me. It's not terrible, though. I still thought that the concept was pretty cool, and like how we get to the part where we're going to the haunted house, and there's also a murder, I think. So that part was also a little bit interesting, but then it kind of fell apart for me towards the end. So, on this one. After that, I read Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. This is historical crime noir that is dual perspective. One of the perspectives, a male main character nicknamed as Elvis. Well, he just goes by Elvis, and he works for this enforcer group that's a part of the government and that enacts violence against student protesters in 1970s Mexico. I think it was during the time of the Dirty War. And then we have a female main character who is approaching 30. She's dealing with some insecurity issues, and she is an assistant. She's like a secretary in like a law firm. And both of these perspectives overlap or intertwine because they know about this young woman who has access to these pictures, and they're both just trying to have access to these pictures. And that's pretty much a lot of the stories regarding how we find that, but also learning more about Elvis and Mate. Yes, I think that's the female main character's name. Okay, Mate. Okay, I do remember that much. And this was I don't know if I want to say enjoy, but I thought this was actually a really good novel. Now, I did have to look up what noir fiction was because I wasn't even sure what this. I didn't know how noir works, but noir is a sub-genre of crime fiction, if you did not know. Some people may know it as like hard-boiled detective fiction, but it doesn't require a detective to be the main character. But in this one, I did find it interesting in how Moreno-Garcia took the noir as a genre and incorporated into 1970s Mexico. I'm not really familiar with the Dirty War in the 1970s in Mexico at all. I'm not familiar with this kind of history, but it was kind of fascinating a little bit. It was actually pretty fascinating for me to follow along the story and just learning of the political unrest that was going on in Mexico and the political corruption as well. I think this is actually a very fascinating read. I am aware though that as far as Sylvia Moreno-Garcia's works, her backlist, this is not a lot of people's favorites, but I personally really did enjoy this one. I think if you go into this knowing that this is noir, and if you also are not familiar with noir fiction, I do recommend looking up what that genre is and its genre conventions, because Sylvia Moreno-Garcia is doing something a little bit different based on my basic understanding of the genre conventions. But I am now curious to check out noir fiction a little bit more to really get into the genre conventions a little bit more. I'm still new to it, but based on my quick search of it online, this is quite a fascinating read, and I did give it 4.25 stars. It just took me a while to get into what was going on and the characters and political stuff, but once I got into it, it was really good. So far, Sylvia Moreno-Garcia has not missed so far, so looking forward to reading more of her works. After that, I read Meet Me at Blue Hour by Sarah Sook. This book was compared to Past Lives and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and I was recommended this book because of the fact that it's compared to Past Lives. But this is young adult contemporary. There is the sci-fi element regarding memories, recovering memories, erasing particular memories as well. And we are following two teenagers who were childhood friends, but then something happened, and the male main character, because this also is dual perspective as well, the main character forgot. I don't know. He chose to forget the female main character, and she's about all that, and it's also about them kind of rekindling their friendship a little bit, but also maybe going more romantic as well. I do have to say, I did enjoy my time reading this story. I do think that this was actually pretty good. I think the comparison to Past Life is pretty much apt. I'm not familiar with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind or anything like that, but with Past Lives, it's pretty spot on. I give this one 4 stars. I would have rated this maybe a little bit higher if this was adult, not gonna lie. But for what the story is, I think this was really, really good. It just didn't give me that 5-star feel at all, but this was a very solid read. After that, I read Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This is her, I think, young adult debut novel. I think I read this one in the video diary. I don't know if it's out yet by the time this video is up, but if it's not, it's fine. It'll be linked in the video description eventually, if not yet. And this one, y'all, was really cute. I really, really enjoyed this one. I think I read this one via audio. Definitely do recommend the audiobook, and I give it 4.5 stars. I just really, really enjoyed my time reading Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute. After that, I read The Art of Scandal by Regina Black. This was the book I was reading during the Stitch Day readathon. And at the time, I couldn't really give you all a coherent review anyways, but this book is an adult contemporary romance that's also an age gap romance. So the female main character is 37 years old, who is also the wife of the mayor of some city. I already forgot where it was. It's somewhere in the DMV area, if I remember correctly. And then we have the male main character, who is 26, who is the son of this very powerful, wealthy family in this city, town, or whatever. And those two hit up having a romance. It is very much dramatic and it's messy. Like, oh my gosh, the mayor's wife going with like the son of like this rich, wealthy, powerful family. Like, it's a whole thing. Oh my gosh, y'all, this was so juicy. If you're into mess, like if you were here for messy, complex, unlikable, but also nuanced main characters that end up falling in love with some flaws and having substantial character development and dealing with their insecurities, y'all, this is the book for you. Okay, Regina Black, I am going to be reading more from Regina Black. This is her debut novel that came out a couple years ago. She does have another book coming out later on this year called August Layne. I will be checking in. Okay, I'm tapping in, okay? I'm locked in for August Layne because The Art of Scandal, oh, this was a scandal. Child, messy, dramatic. If y'all like The Favorites, this one, messy. And I mean, even if you're not too much into age gap romance, I think that's the age gap romance that actually really works. Personally, the fact that the youngest person here is not super young, they're in their late 20s, and the older person is not that much older, is like 11-year age gap. And I just really, really appreciate how Regina Black handled this situation regarding the messiness and the drama and the complex emotions. It was just so good. Oh my gosh, I want more people to be reading this book. And I did give this book 5 stars, obviously. This was definitely a favorite of the month. And then lastly, I did end the month with Triple Sec by T.J. Alexander. This is an adult contemporary sapphic romance. And it also is polyamorous as well, so it's a sapphic poly romance. If I remember correctly, I think the main character has been divorced for a while, kind of felt like, oh, bitter about love and stuff. And then she finds like this like really high-spirited, cool young woman, and right out like she is married to someone else, but they start getting a little bit into a poly situation. Now, granted, this book does feel a little bit like intro to polyamory, to being in a poly relationship, you know, and all that stuff. So I felt like, okay, we don't need this to be super introductory or whatever, but it's fine. But I did really appreciate, though, how like this book really emphasizes that you need to communicate. I mean, you still need to communicate, though, in a monogamous relationship, but especially in a poly situation, you need to be communicating your needs, your boundaries, the emotions, and everything. I really appreciate that. And Mel, I think that's the main character's name. Mel had a really substantial like character development as well. And also really learned and opened up in the fact that she could be into a poly relationship with this other person, and maybe also more than one person and all that stuff. I give this one 4 stars. It just didn't give me that like higher rating feeling for me personally, but it was a pretty enjoyable read. And this was actually a really solid read. I do look forward to reading more by T.J. Alexander in the future. But yeah, that is it, y'all. That is all the books that I read in May and June. I mean, all these books I have here physically are the books that I read in May. I have nothing here for June. I'm sorry, I got absolutely nothing. But I will say, I am actually quite satisfied, though, that I got through this many books for my physical TBR in May. Hopefully, I'll be able to read a little bit more for my physical TBR, though, in July and August. We shall see. And also, I do think that having bi-monthly wrap-ups is not really conducive for me because I read a lot in May, and I could barely remember too much about the books that I was reading in May. So hopefully I can go back to doing like monthly wrap-up videos again because, child, it's getting harder and harder to remember my thoughts on these books, okay? I know I have a reading journal and all, but it gets a little bit difficult after time. But regardless, though, we move on. We shall see if I even end up going back to monthly wrap-up videos. We shall see. It's not even set in stone because I could feel like, oh yeah, we should do every month, and then being like, no, we gotta push that thing back, and it is what it is. Thank you all for joining me here for this wrap-up video. This is a pretty long one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did like the video, comment down below what y'all read in May and June, what you hope to read in July and August. I will be very curious to hear about that. And if you're new here, you like my vibe, you like the books I read, I do recommend subscribing if you have not already. Now, if you made it this far into the video, you're not sure what to say, but you want to leave me an emoji to let me know you're here, I think maybe you should leave me some sort of heart emoji, whatever color heart of your choice, since I did end up reading some romance throughout the 2 months. Anyways, let's wrap this up because I think my autofocus right now is like fighting for its life. So, thank you all for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye!